Hi, I'm Pastor Kerry. Before we get started, there are a few things I want to encourage you to have on hand. First, I want to encourage you to have a set of the sermon notes. If you don't already have them, you can go to the link that's right down below the video. It'll take you to a place where you can print a set of the sermon notes for yourself. Also want to encourage you to have some communion elements. You want to have some bread or a cracker. You want to have some juice or some wine, and if you don't have juice or wine, probably any beverage would suffice. But you'll want to have those communion elements because here in about 20 minutes, when we get to the end of the sermon, we'll move right into a time of communion with you. So, if you need any of those things, I would encourage you to pause the playback right now. Grab whatever you need. Once everything is ready, then go ahead and resume the video. So, when you go to a concert, what are the 8 words that you never want to hear? When you go to a concert, what are the 8 words that you never want to hear? 8 words other than, "I'm sorry, sir, but these tickets are counterfeit." Other than those 8 words, because you never want to hear those 8 words either. But the 8 words that you never want to hear at a concert are, "This is a song from our new album." Am I right? Because at least for people that are my age, we're going to see bands or artists that have been around for a few years at this point. We're not going to see the young kids with the brand new album out. We're going to see the bands that we were fans of several decades ago. And a lot of times when we're going to see those bands, for example, going to see Journey in concert, we really aren't interested in hearing Journey play the COVID vaccine blues from their new album. We want to hear Journey play Don't Stop Believin'. That's why we bought the ticket. And so, I think that for a lot of artists, I understand why they are continuing to create. That's what artists do. They create. And a lot of artists are putting out new albums. I totally get that. But the thing that they're up against, and the thing that I can feel as a fan of some of these heritage artists, if we want to call them that, heritage artists, is that we want to hear them play the classics. We want to hear them play our favorites. And we don't really have nearly as much interest in hearing something from their new album. And the reason that I bring that up is because in the lectionary psalm that we're going to be taking a look at for October 22nd of 2023, the psalmist is going to have something to say about new songs. And so, without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the lectionary psalm. It just happens to be the 96th psalm, and this is the passage in its entirety. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name, proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among all peoples. For great is the Lord, and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him, strength and glory are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens rejoice. Let the earth be glad. Let the sea resound and all that is in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. Let all creation Let all creation rejoice before the Lord, for he comes. He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness. May God bless the reading of the powerful and inspiring word. So, as I said, this is the 96th Psalm. And my guess is that as I started reading that to you, and you heard me say the words, sing to the Lord, a new song, sing to the Lord, all the earth, you were probably thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I know this psalm. And then my guess is that as I continued reading, you probably thought to yourself, maybe I don't know this psalm after all, because those opening words are very familiar to us. But the rest of the psalm Again, maybe not so much. I can tell you that at least for myself, I don't think I've ever preached on the 96th Psalm before. I think this is the first time that I've ever preached on this particular passage. So what I'd like to do first is what we always do, is I'd like to talk through the passage, and I'd like to make sure that we're following with what the psalmist was trying to convey to us in this beautiful psalm. After we do that, then I think what we'll do is we'll focus on 3 of the reminders that this psalm has for us about the one true God that we worship. So, the first thing that jumps out at me as I take a look at Psalm 96 is that there's not a title line. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the Psalms, if you grabbed a Bible right now and if you opened it up, you would find that with a lot of the Psalms there's a title line that would say, of David, or of the sons of Korah, a psalm, a song, for the director of music. But there would be some sort of title line to the psalm, and many times that title line would attribute it to someone like David, or to Solomon, or to Moses, or to whoever. This psalm doesn't have that. And if you're wondering to yourself, well, gosh, Pastor Kerry, maybe that's a typo. Maybe whoever put these sermon notes together forgot to just include the title line in there. Actually, I do have a Bible right here, and I can open it up to the 96th Psalm, and I can tell you that there's not a title line in here either. There are a number of the Psalms that don't have a title line for whatever reason. This is one of those Psalms. There are some of the commentaries that I looked at this past week that said even though there isn't a title line that attributes this psalm to David, it sure sounds like David. And I tend to agree with that. So maybe it was David who wrote this psalm, but since there's no title line attributing it to David, I'm just going to refer to the author of this psalm for the next 20 minutes as the psalmist. So, the psalmist says that we should sing to the Lord a new song. And a logical question for us to ask is, should we take that literally? Does that mean that every time that we think about God or every time we sing to God that we should be singing a new song? Or should we, like Journey, stick to the classics? And so we're going to come back. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But the psalmist continues and says, sing to the Lord, all the earth. And I want you to notice all the earth there is an important theme that we're going to keep stumbling back upon as we continue through this psalm. And the reason that all the earth, not just the Hebrew people, not just Israel, but all of the earth, the reason why that is an important theme throughout this psalm is because I believe that the psalmist, whoever he or she was, since we don't know who the psalmist was, whoever the psalmist was, they were clearly thinking above and beyond the Hebrew people. They were thinking above and beyond the nation of Israel. So, as we continue through this first stanza, as we continue through verses 1 through 3, the psalmist says that we should praise God's name, proclaim God's salvation, declare God's glory among the nations plural. Declare God's marvelous deeds among all peoples, plural. Again, thinking beyond the Hebrews, thinking beyond Israel, thinking about everybody on the face of the earth. So that's the first stanza. Now we get to the second stanza, and the psalmist continues by saying that God is great and worthy of praise, and that God is to be feared above all gods, plural. For the gods, plural, of the nations are idols. But the Lord, the one true God, made the heavens. And one of the things that I think we have to remind ourselves is that in our time, in the year 2023, that when we think about God, almost everyone on earth would generally be in agreement as to who the one true God is. Because as Christians, we worship the God of the Old and the New Testaments, but those of the Jewish faith worship the God of the Old Testament. Even those of the Muslim faith worship the God of the Old Testament. Complicated discussion there, but they do worship the God of the Old Testament. They refer to God as Allah, but it's the same God. It's the God of Abraham. We worship the God of Abraham. Those of the Jewish faith worship the God of Abraham, and those of the Muslim faith worship the God of Abraham. So we all tend to agree, most everybody on earth, of all of the major religions on earth, we tend to agree on who that one true God is. But we have to remind ourselves that thousands of years ago, that it was basically the Hebrew people who were worshiping the one true God, and they were surrounded by other nations and other people groups who had lots and lots of false gods. And we've talked before about how people worshipped Baal, and people worshipped Asherah, and people worshipped Molech, and the list goes on of all the false gods that they worshipped thousands of years ago. And so the psalmist is saying, look, you've got it wrong. Those of you who are worshiping all of these other lowercase g gods, you are worshiping idols, the psalmist says at the end of verse 5. But the God, the Lord, is the one who made the heavens. And so that is why we ascribe splendor and majesty to the one true God. As a matter of fact, now, as we get into this third stanza in verses 7 through 10, now the psalmist is going to be saying to everyone, you also need to ascribe all of these attributes to the one true God. Now in verses 7 through 10, the psalmist says, ascribe to the Lord all you families of nations. So he's saying all of you need to be a part of this. He says you need to ascribe to the Lord glory, strength, glory to his name. An offering needs to be brought into his courts. Worship the Lord, splendor and holiness, tremble before him all the earth. Say among the nations, plural, the Lord reigns. The world's firmly established, it cannot be moved. And then there's one final thing that's going to become important as we get to the very end of the psalm. And the psalmist says that God is going to judge the peoples, plural, so talking about everybody on earth, is going to judge the peoples with equity. So God is going to be fair, is going to be equal, is going to demonstrate equity when he judges all people. Now, we're going to come back to that theme in just a second, but for a moment, as we enter the third and the final stanza, as we get into verses 11 through 13, all of a sudden the psalmist is going to share some beautiful and some poetic imagery with us. And the psalmist, as we start this third stanza, then says, let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad, let the sea resound and everything that's in the sea. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. So suddenly, the psalmist is talking about how all of creation, the world, the heavens, everything, all of it is declaring the glory of the one true God. And then, when we get to verse 13, the psalmist concludes by saying, let all creation rejoice before the Lord. Because the Lord is coming. The Lord is coming to judge the earth. The psalmist concludes this psalm by saying he will judge the world in righteousness and judge the peoples in his faithfulness. Thus ends the 96th psalm. So, it is a powerful psalm, a moving psalm. It's a psalm in which the psalmist is trying to help us to look beyond our own church, our own people group, and is trying to help us to see all of the people in the world, is trying to help us to see really the entire universe and the way that the entire universe, and certainly everything in earth, on earth, all of it points to the one true God. So, what do we take away from this powerful and compelling psalm? As I said before, I think there are at least 3 reminders that the psalm has for us about God, and the first reminder is this: God is glorified by our worship. God is glorified by our worship. Friends, you've heard me say this before, and you will hear me say it again. The purpose for us being here is to worship and to honor and to glorify the one true God. And this psalm talks about it. And the psalmist says very specifically that we should sing to the Lord a new song. And I know that I referred to this earlier, but I asked earlier, do you think that the psalmist meant that literally, that every time we sing to God that it should be a new song? Well, obviously not, because even the Hebrew people weren't doing that thousands of years ago. They had many of these psalms, Psalms, that were also songs, songs, that they would sing over and over every year at the appointed time on the appointed holiday. They would sing these psalms, which were songs, over and over. And so the psalmist was saying, sing to the Lord a new song. Do we take that literally? Well, perhaps. And I'm sure that there are many people who have looked at that and been inspired and have written new songs. But at the same time, I think that there's also a figurative way in which we should interpret that, and I'm going to come back and talk about that here in just a few minutes. But God is glorified by our worship. And I think that one of the things that you and I have both experienced is that when we've gone to church on Sunday mornings, whether we went to a church that had traditional worship, whether we went to a church that had contemporary worship, one of the things that we do together that brings me joy, and hopefully it brings you joy as well, as we sing together and we worship the one true God and we lift up our voices in song. And that is one of the ways in which we glorify God, is through our songs of worship. So that is the first reminder this passage has for us. The second reminder this passage has for us is this: God is honored by all creation. God is honored by all creation. In this passage, at the very end, the psalmist in verses 11 and 12 talks about how the heavens rejoice, the earth is glad, the sea resounds, the fields are jubilant, the trees of the forest are singing for joy. And if this theme seems kind of familiar to you, it just so happens that it was only 2 weeks ago that we were talking about the 19th Psalm, Psalm 19, and it had the same theme in it as well, talking about how creation, how the entire universe declares the glory of God. Here we are 2 weeks later, we're talking about the 96th Psalm, and the theme is coming up once again. And I talked a couple of weeks ago about how there are many times when I have experienced God when I was out in God's creation, when I was in the Rocky Mountains, when I was in the Grand Canyon. I even talked about a time when I was in amongst the cornfields in Nebraska, and I looked around and I saw the sun setting on this sloping hill, and I just thought, I am experiencing God right now out here amongst these cornfields. Because the creation points to the one true God. And that is a recurring theme throughout the Bible as well. I think a couple of weeks ago I talked about how Paul discusses that in Romans chapter 1, that the entire universe declares that there is one true God and points to the one true God. So, now what I want to do very quickly is I want to talk about the third reminder this passage has for us. And this reminder might seem a little bit challenging, but let's go ahead and talk about it. The third reminder is this: God is established as the ultimate judge. This psalm reminds us that God is established as the ultimate judge. So before we talk about this, I just want to ask you a question. So everybody on the face of the earth, everything that they have ever done, it's been good and it's been the right thing at all times. Am I right about that? Of course I'm not right about that, because that's not true. All of us have done things that were wrong. Every single one of us. Even today, I've done things that I was not terribly proud of a few moments later after I thought about it, as I was driving my car and realizing I wasn't very polite to that driver over there. And so, friends, one of the things that all of us have to recognize is that because not everything that's done by all of us, because it's not always good, then there has to be a judgment. There has to be someone who comes in and says, this wasn't right. Someone who comes in and says, this was wrong. My goodness, all you have to do is turn on your TV right now and watch the news and be reminded that there are some people on the face of this planet who are doing unthinkably awful things to other people on the face of this planet. And certainly, we have to want there to be a judgment. If we want God to judge those who are doing awful things to other people, then that judgment has to apply to us as well. And that's where it gets a little bit perhaps dicey for us, because then of course we start to feel a little bit nervous and we start to say, well, gosh, all the bad things I've done over the course of my life, I mean, that's not going to be fun when I have to face judgment for those things. And that's right, that's true. But we also have to remind ourselves that because of our faith, that we have been declared righteous through faith. We have been saved from judgment through faith. And so when God decides to judge all of us, for those of us that are people of faith, we can rest assured that we have been declared righteous, that we have been saved from judgment through our faith, that we're going to be okay. Now, I told you that I wanted to come back to that idea of a new song, because that's how the psalm starts. Sing to the Lord a new song. And I told you that I absolutely think that the psalmist probably intended that in a literal sense, but I also think that the psalmist meant that for all of us in a figurative sense as well. And so my question to you, and my question for myself today as well, is this: what is that new song going to be for us? I'm telling you that one of the things that I've been wrestling with over the past several days is, what is my new song going to be? And not in the sense that I'm planning to sit down and write a song, because nobody wants to hear that, but in the sense that there is probably something new in my life that I can do for God, or that I can do for my neighbor, or that I can do for my family, or whoever, whatever. There needs to be a new song in my life. So what's it going to be? And I want to direct that question to you as well. What is the new song going to be in your life? I certainly want to encourage you to talk to God about that in your prayer time in the next few days. If there's going to be a new song that you sing in a figurative sense in your life, what is that song going to be? And now I want to go back to what we were talking about just a moment ago. The fact that we don't have to worry about that coming judgment because we have been saved through faith. What we know is that we were saved through faith in Jesus Christ. And because Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice, we can be saved through faith. I want to remind you of the Apostle Paul's words in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, "This is my body which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me." And so right now, I want to invite you to grab your communion elements, and I'll go ahead and grab mine, and I want to invite you to partake with me. I apologize that this video is about to cut off, but go ahead and partake with me. The body of Christ, broken for us, we partake in remembrance of him. And the blood of Christ, shed for us, we drink in remembrance